Hello, I'm Dr. Todd Osborne, and I am excited to talk to you about our new brain health program we have here at Scenic City Clinic. And I put together a presentation to go through for you. And it's all about brain health, the new studies that are out, the new research that's out. The brain, the nervous system runs everything. So if they're not functioning correctly, then nothing functions correctly. So we're excited to get into this, and we're calling it Change Your Brain and Change Your Life. But it's really about how you can reach your best potential for your brain health moving forward. So who can benefit? Well, this really focuses towards children, ADD, ADHD, learning disabilities, dyslexia, reading problems, behavior problems, social clumsiness or problems with social interaction, memory issues, even aging issues that come into play, balance and coordination, anxiety, fear, sleep issues, and work performance. How well can you perform at work? And sports and activity performance. How well can you do at your hobbies, or if you're an athlete, how much better can you do these things with brain enhancement improvements going on? So really anyone can benefit from this program. So here's the thing. We have a lot of problems going on in society today, especially with children. The statistics are going off the moon with learning disabilities, ADD, ADHD, autistic spectrum. Those numbers just keep climbing and climbing and climbing, and so it can be very frustrating for the parent and the student, the teachers that are involved with it, and so it's not the kid's fault. Okay. These are usually very intelligent kids, very intelligent people, but their brain is not functioning well so that they can do the skills, they can learn the skills and perform at the level of their intelligence. And so we say blame the brain. It's not that the child is unintelligent. It's not that the child is lazy. And it's certainly not poor parenting. So don't blame yourself for this. And that's what I want to try to do with this presentation, is to give you some insight as to what is the cause and what's going on with this. So brain function is responsible for everything. And the brain's like mama, the old saying, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. And that's the way with the brain. If the brain isn't happy, then nothing's happy. So I want to take you through just some brain basics. I'm certainly not going to give you a full neuroanatomy course or a neurology course by any means, but you need just some basic understanding. And this is going to be very basic, but I think it'll help you understand how the brain works, how the brain builds, and what we can do about it moving into the future. So this is kind of a sketch of the brain here, and this is the prefrontal cortex up here. This would be your brain stem that goes into your spinal cord, down your spine, and then the cerebellum is right back here. So really the only thing we need to understand right now is the cerebellum's here in the back of your head. It sits right back here. And then your prefrontal cortex and cortex are up here. And that's really all we need to know about that. Here's the thing. The brain develops from the bottom up. So in other words, it starts here developing at the cerebellum and then develops the upper part of the brain. When we're born, 100% of the brain stem is here. Okay, we're born with that, and that's your breathing, a lot of your basic functions for your body are all right there, and you have those when you're born. Obviously, you need those. but the rest of your brain, only about 25% of it is there, and it is developed. And so the brain builds from the bottom up. And that's a key principle that we need to understand here. And it's built by sensory information coming in. So by movement or senses that come in. And 90% of it is proprioception or movement, the signals that your muscles are sending here. So just like a child, in the beginning they aren't moving, but they slowly start to move their arms and legs at some point. That's developing the brain, and once they roll over and start to pick their head up and eventually crawling, these are all stages they go through, but this is all proprioceptive input that's going into the base of the brain that's developing the rest of the brain. And so just to help you understand this, a cat, if you take a kitten and you blindfold that kitten at birth, for 6 months, you keep them blindfolded for 6 months, that cat will be blind for the rest of its life because it's not getting any sensory input, so it's not building that in the brain. Here's the interesting part. If you don't have to blindfold the kitten, but if you do not let the paws touch the ground for the first 6 months, that cat will also be blind for the rest of its life, because that input that's coming in from the sensory side, touching, movement, the muscles, and that feeds in to build the brain. And so we have to understand this, that it builds from the bottom up. The cortex up here, that's where we think, that's where we focus, that's where we plan, that's where our decisions come from. So that all needs to be built up here, right? So we don't have these things. You think about a newborn, those things are not there with the newborn. That has to be built up. And once this gets built, then you have what we call top-down regulation. So it builds from the base, it builds up the cortex up here, and then we have top-down regulation. So this makes the decisions up here. So input comes in, this part of our brain makes the decision, it sends the signal back down. But here's the thing, what if, for whatever reason, we didn't get this built all the way like it should? For some reason, the cerebellum didn't build part of what we needed to be built in there. And so we're lacking in that. And then our top-down regulation doesn't work like it should. So that's why we have to build the brain from the base up. Our brain's a skill development center. So movement determines how the brain develops and functions. And as I said before, proprioception, or signals from the muscles to the brain, is what builds this. And specifically your postural muscles, they give the most input. And so your postural muscles are those that help you stand up. You're fighting against gravity 24/7, right? So there's constant input being put into that brain. So movement, function, and input from these postural muscles builds the brain. And isn't it interesting from a chiropractic standpoint and an upper cervical chiropractic standpoint that the brain itself is built mostly by postural muscles, and which postural muscles have the greatest ratio of the muscle spindles that send those signals? Well, sure enough, it's all the muscles suboccipitally right up here at the base of the brain that essentially supports your head. So your head and neck posture, those muscles give more input than anywhere else. So that's why, as an upper cervical chiropractor, we've always talked about affecting the brain, because we know when this brain stem is imbalanced, when that atlas is tipped, or as we say, your head's not on straight, that is going to give, these muscles will be giving asymmetric signals or not balanced signals. And so we will get dysfunction going in there. So we may have signals coming up but they're not the correct signals. I would be like in the old days with the radio, right? You had to tune it and you'd get some static before the digital radios, and you had to tune that in. So we may be getting some static in the signals, if you will. And we may be getting input into the cerebellum to build the brain, but it may be abnormal input or input that's not what we would like it to see. And so because of that, we want this atlas balanced. That allows the signals to go through here correctly and to build the brain correctly. And that's one of the reasons why upper cervical chiropractors and chiropractic itself has had so much success with children that have ADHD, other learning disabilities. We see kids on the autism spectrum that improve on that spectrum after getting their atlas balanced, because we're getting the proper signals going in there. A couple other things on that is the fact that the brain floats in a fluid. It's called CSF, that's cerebral spinal fluid. But around your spinal cord and your brain, this kind of greenish area is all fluid. So your brain actually weighs about 1,500 grams or a little over 3 pounds. But because it's floating in the CSF, it feels lighter, and it feels like only 50 grams or about 1/10 of a pound. So instead of having 3 pounds weighing down, could you imagine your brain just sitting on the bottom of your skull and pushing down with 3 pounds of pressure? That would not be good in any way, shape, or form. And so it floats in this CSF fluid, and it only allows about 1/10 of a pound of pressure because it's floating. Just like if you take a tennis ball and put it in the pool, it's going to float. If we drop it out here in the air, it's going to go directly down, but in the water it floats. So it's not as heavy there because the water is holding it up. And so if we have imbalance down here at the base of the brain, we can have this cerebral spinal fluid can get choked off, so it can build up pressure. It can cause maybe that brain not to be floating like it should be in there, or pressure around the entire brain. And this flows. The CSF is in here to not only float the brain, but it's also the cleaner, if you will. Just like you have a lymphatic system to clean out the toxins from the rest of your body, well, you have a glymphatic system in your brain, and that is the CSF. It dumps into that CSF, and this needs to be flowing just like blood, but it flows and cleans out the toxins from all the neurotoxins from your brain function, and cleans that out so your brain can keep going. So if this gets kinked off, this is not flowing correctly, we can get pooling of the toxins, and thus we can have some neurological function that could possibly be affected by that. The last thing I'll say too is there's the internal jugular vein, and recent research has shown that the atlas misalignment can actually affect that blood flow, or the flow of that internal jugular that's trying to get out of the brain, get blood out of the brain, and the CSF actually empties into that and to get those toxins out. So we can have blood flow problems in the back of the brain that can affect things. So it's very important that we get that atlas balanced and the rotation correct in there, so that we do have the proper input from the upper cervical muscles, the muscle spindles and the postural muscles, and obviously proper brainstem function so that the brain can do exactly what it was designed to do. And here's just some pre and post. And you can see here, this is the head, the skull, and the spine going down, but the atlas is right here, and you can see how that atlas is shifted up to the left, the head's leaning to the left, the neck is to the right, and here is the post, and you can see that atlas came down level, and we are much better on the angles with the head and the neck. And this one's on the other side. This one's up and out on the right. We're looking at this from the back, and you can see that we have a significant plane line or increase on the right side, and we have the head leaning to the right, the neck is to the left, and as you can see on the post, this didn't come all the way down, but a significant improvement, and the angles are much better. So that's what we have to try to do, is to get that atlas in correctly so that things can function the way they're supposed to. So here's what I want you to understand. The brain builds from the bottom up. It builds the skills up here, but it comes from the bottom up. And most of the time when we're being treated for these situations, well, whatever it might be, let's just say ADHD, usually things are being treated from top down, and it doesn't work that way. Now, there's things that you can do that, you know, as far as learning programs, behavioral programs, they'll even use drugs and things of that nature. Reading programs for those struggling with reading or a learning disability of that type of thing. And those are all top-down approaches. Now, they're not bad, they help, but they're not going to get to the cause. And it was once thought the brain, once it was developed, that was it. There's nothing else you can do in there. But recent research and studies have shown that that is incorrect, and there is neuroplasticity, which means that the brain can build new cells, it can build new connections, and so we can continue throughout life building that brain in there. And so it's showing that we can do that, we can get the new synapses developed, and ultimately heal the brain or help the brain build from the bottom up. And so we have to address this from bottom up and not top down. And that's where Zing Performance has come on the table. And this is something that's new to us here at the clinic that we recently found out about. And this has been developed for many years. Just a quick background on it. Winford Dorr is the gentleman's name. He's from Europe, England, and he had a daughter that had severe learning problems and just struggled throughout her school years. And in fact, it got to a point where it was so bad and it had affected her so much that she attempted suicide. And that was the last straw for him. So he said, I'm going to figure this out. And so he had been blessed financially, so he spent all the money and did all the research, and he was hiring professors from Harvard and researchers all over the place to figure this out. And he has developed the Zing Performance program to build that brain from the bottom up. And the good news he shares is that his daughter actually learned to read at age 27 after they've developed this program. And they've had over 50,000 cases and studies with this, and it's just phenomenal the work they're doing. So we want to help get the word out for them, and it goes right along with what we do chiropractically of trying to get the brain and nervous system functioning properly. And it's treating the cause, not the symptom. And that's the problem. We are a symptom treating society. And so we have to look at this differently and understand that treating the symptom is not going to correct anything. The cause correction is what's going to make a difference and really change your brain and your life. So there's so many symptoms that come into play. You can see in group 1 over here, reading, clumsiness, speech, writing, spelling, picky eating, motion sickness, spinning or dizziness, those types of things. And then group 2, attention, impulsivity, organization, night terrors, stress, OCD, stimming rituals, emotional control, all comes in. Now, nobody has all of these, but we're not grouping them into a particular diagnosis because we're not really diagnosing with what we do here. We're just understanding that these are the symptoms that go along with many of these other diagnoses that are out there, and that we can help the brain function better and hopefully see these symptoms. If we get the cause corrected, then many times these symptoms improve or go away. So what end do we want to focus on? We want to look at the cause, right? Not the symptoms. So chiropractic, that's been our mantra for forever. We're all about treating the cause, not the symptoms. So if I have low back pain and that's being caused because there's a spinal misalignment, then I want to correct the spinal misalignment rather than give a pain pill for the symptom, right? And so if someone has dyslexia, in other words, they're reading the spelling is all jumbled to them when they look at a word, we can do all kinds of reading programs and things to try to help them organize those letters in their mind, but that's treating the symptom, right? If we can treat the cause and get their brain and their eyes to function correctly so that they see those letters in the correct order, then reading becomes easy for them, and that's correcting the cause. So, have you tried everything? We have a lot of people that have. There's a lot of things out there, from phonics to just teaching patience and discipline, extra tutoring for school. And these are all well-intentioned and good programs, but unfortunately they're completely missing the root cause. So we want to fix that. If we don't fix the root cause, nothing will work the way it should. So if we can fix the root cause, then the tutoring, the extra learning, everything that goes along with the phonics and the reading programs work like a miracle. And that's awesome because we've got the brain functioning like it should. The learning process in the brain is the missing link. Winford Dorr has discovered that, and with all their research, and it's really been overlooked up to this point. We've always tried, as I said, to work from the top down, to work up here on that cortex, and we have to understand that it's back here where we're going to build the brain, and it's that cerebellum. And we use the inner ear, the vestibular, so your balance comes into play, your postural muscles, think about that, your balance, your postural muscles, all that input that's going into the brain back here in the cerebellum is then going to build up here in the prefrontal and the cortex. And we'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily, but I want you to understand the 4 stages of skill development. Number 1 is unconscious incompetence. And we don't know what we don't know, right? So where do we start? Okay, how about learning to walk? Did you read a manual on how to learn to walk? No, you seen someone else doing it and you wanted to mimic mom or dad, right? And so that's how we get unconscious competence. We don't even know how to do it. We don't even know it's something that you can do until we start to see it. Then comes conscious incompetence. And we're starting to do it. We're starting to get up and walk. You think about a child when they're first starting to walk. Do they do it well? No, they do it pretty badly, right? They're falling down a lot. They're shaky. Their balance is not there. So we're conscious that this is something we can do, but we're very incompetent at it. And then we get conscious competence, okay? So you're starting to get the hang of it, right? And now, you know, after that child, a month or so, now they can get up and they can toddle right on over to that chair 10 or 12 feet away. And they're still thinking about it, right? And they're still maybe a little wobbly, but they're walking a lot now, but they're thinking about it, and they're concentrating a lot on it, and they're thinking about, I've got to put this foot forward, and they're really paying attention to that. And that's conscious competence. And then ultimately what we need to get to with these skills is unconscious competence. And unconscious competence is you can do it without thinking about it. And so I'll ask all of you, maybe you just walked to get into the chair where you're at. Maybe you're watching this presentation from a chair and you walked there. Did you think about how to walk there? No, you just did it, right? And it was unconscious competence. And so we do these things unconsciously, and that's because that skill has been built in the brain, okay? So we practice, we're developing the skills down here, and then it goes into here, we're thinking what to do, and eventually when we get it perfected, it's up here in the cortex. And now this top down drives everything unconsciously. We don't have to think about it. It's just running from the cortex and going down, but that skill was developed. But I promise you it was developed from the input coming in here to the cerebellum, and eventually we were thinking about it, and eventually it got automated in that cortex. So it's just like riding a bike, right? When you first start to ride a bike, you're having to think about it, right? And you can't balance. I remember when my dad took the training wheels off of my bike, and I was like out there, I was like, I want the training wheels back on because I can't do this. And he's like, no, keep practicing, keep trying. And eventually I was starting to, okay, I can think about this. I've got to lean a little, I've got to turn the wheel a little, and I could get there. Well, now I haven't ridden a bike in probably 10 years. But guess what? I could get on that bike and take right off, right? And I wouldn't have to think about it because that skill has been developed and it's up there. And that's the great part. Once we develop this skill, it's there. And so that's neat. So just like riding a bike, and isn't that a saying we have? It's just like riding a bike. You know, you'll be able to take off on it with no problem, right? So understand the fact this is where the potential is hiding. A lot of the brain diagrams don't even mention the cerebellum down here, and it's kind of been ignored of where it's at. And recent research is showing that, man, that's where we need to be concentrating. That's what we need to be working on. So unfortunately, sometimes the cerebellum doesn't finish the job, or we have underdeveloped skills for whatever reason. Maybe we just didn't develop that skill, or it didn't get finished, or it didn't get perfected, and therefore, for reasons we don't know, we stay in that conscious competence phase, and we never get to the unconscious competence stage with some of those particular skills. So we still have to have a bit of thinking that goes along when we're performing that skill, and think about if that is reading, or tying your shoelace, or maybe speech, or writing, or spelling, motion sickness, those type of things. But think about that with reading. That should be automated, right? That should be an automatic skill. You just read and the words pop in here, right? And you're able to retain those words. But think about that if that skill did not get fully developed and you're having to think while you're reading. So I'm not just thinking about the words and digesting what the information is. I'm literally having to think about reading. So that's taking up space up here, right? So instead of me really digesting the content, I'm not able to do that because my brain is engaged with just how to do that. Riding a bike. When I'm first riding a bike, I wasn't looking around at the scenery to see what I could see and where I was going. Man, I was concentrating, I was looking down, and so that was taking up a lot of that. Now I can get on a bike and I can just take off and ride. And if I go ride down here by the river walk, I can be looking around and enjoying, and my brain is open to take in that sensory information instead of thinking about how am I going to ride this bike and stay upright. So that's the big key in all this. And so we get the underdeveloped skills, and then there's symptoms, there's no precision, there's no consistency, and ultimately, especially for kids, but even adults, this leads to low self-confidence, social issues, and it's not an unintelligent child, like I said. It's not an unintelligent person, it's just that these skills have not developed, and so the way they look at themselves is different, and maybe they've even been labeled with something that they have to deal with. So we have to, poor skills have to be consciously supported up here. Those things that should be back here that we're not thinking about, we're having to think about them. And essentially, when the brain doesn't know what's happening, when it doesn't know what's happening next, it creates stress for us. Anybody have any stress in the world? Yeah. And so it's usually when you don't know what's happening next, right? It's that fear of the future, but the brain operates the same way. When it doesn't know what's happening next, that creates stress. So these underdeveloped skills produce exactly that. And so here's another thing you need to know about brain function. And so, like I said, I'm going to keep this as basic as possible, but this part of the brain is very slow. Okay, that's thinking. That takes some time for things to process there. However, back here in the cortex, extremely fast processing, okay? And there's arguments out there in research today, but 40 to 100,000 times faster here than here. So you can understand why we want that skill automated here, because then it's lightning fast, right? Faster than I can snap my fingers is happening here. But if we're having to do it up here, very slow. So that slows everything down. That's really your potential for how quickly you can do these things. And ultimately, that comes into play if you're not processing quickly. And so just like a computer, think about it this way. This is a brand new computer with the new fastest processor that you can get. And then this part is hooked into an old computer that has a super slow processor. So if I'm going to use these two computers, I'm going to try to get everything I can into this computer, right? Because it happens quick. This one I'm sitting there waiting on. I'm waiting on it to load the image for me. I'm waiting on it to do the calculation or the computation. And that is all happening right here. So understand that fact. That's the reason we want to develop these skills and get them automated so that we can have that fast function. And the other thing, this prefrontal cortex is limited. It can only be handling about 7 things at one time. This is unlimited here. We haven't even tapped into near the potential of what this is here. So think about that. If we do not have these skills automated up here and happening quickly, and let's just say somebody's in a classroom and they haven't developed these automated skills, and they're having to think about everything that's being said. They're having to think about what they're reading up on the chalkboard or the projector, the television in the front of the classroom. They've got other people talking, disruptions, and all that's taking up all this space up here. That's stress. That's when we get anxiety. That's when we get social misbehaviors that go on, because essentially this can only handle so much, and then it kind of shorts out and kind of like freaks out, and the brain just says, no more, I don't want any more, I'll do an outburst so I can stop this. And so understand that we're overloading this because this is not able to handle what it should be handling. So huge difference in capacity there. And This is your thinking and controls up here, okay? And so when you have to do that up here, that's conscious compensation that you're having to take care of up here. So less controls, okay? Less able to function, slower speed of making those decisions and controlling that. And when you compensate for poor skills, less capacity for control. So that's where we get the behavior issues. That's where we get the acting out, those type of things, because there's just less capacity up here to control yourself. But that's where you have to make that decision, right? I'm in a social setting. I'm making the decision that I'm not going to talk out loud while the preacher is preaching, or whatever the case might be, right? And so this gets overloaded and you have less control, and so these things happen. So less control happens, what? We get impulsivity, it can be night terrors, stress, risk taking, just your overall emotional control, OCD, all these things can come into play. So let's just look at a typical example, often misunderstood, of reading. It's not low intelligence, it's not laziness, it isn't because they had bad instructors or teachers, it isn't that they didn't learn their phonics, okay? It comes into play. Reading is just a skill, just like riding a bike. And if that skill is not developed and automated, it's going to be a problem. But it's not an indicator of intelligence, okay? Same with writing, spelling, controlling the emotions, memory, organization. And this has been misunderstood for so long, and therefore we've been misunderstood. Our children have been misunderstood because we just don't have that skill. Here's another example often misunderstood: poor listening and retention. And they think, are you choosing not to listen? They're just shutting us out. But that's not the case, because it's very hard work. Remember, only 7 things up here. And when they've got other things going on, and this is the type of child you talk to them and you say, did you hear me? And they say, yes. And then they walk off, and then, 30 seconds later, they're like, what was it you told me to go get? It's because they're just not able. It isn't that they're not listening. They're not able to process it. And so a big misunderstanding with these type of things. Reading is a big factor, and we're able to do eye tracking now in our office. And this is a big key for us to understand what's happening. And hopefully you'll be able to see this. This is a sample. And I think as I click here, you will see this was this child, and you can see we're essentially tracking their eyes, and you can see how they're reading along here. But look at where their eyes are going. They're not even on the line here. The eyes are bouncing all over the place. So you can understand that their eye movement and their visual processing is not fully developed. And so this is a case where reading is difficult. I'm going to show you mine in just a little bit and what it looked like. But reading has never been something that has been an enjoyment for me. I forced myself to read, obviously, to become a doctor of chiropractic. There's a lot of reading involved in that. And fortunately, I was able to overcome my eye tracking problems with other skills that got me through, and I got pretty good grades going through school. But nonetheless, you can understand why a child, maybe they don't read well, they're not doing well in class, they're a very intelligent child, but mom and dad can't understand why he's not learning correctly. And it may be just the fact that they've never developed the reading skill, the eye tracking automated. It wasn't built from the bottom up, and ultimately that's causing a lot of problems. And so here's the thing, the billion-dollar question: how do you make the cerebellum do its job better? So Believe it or not, it's exercise. It is movement, all right? But exercise alone doesn't do it. We have to combine that correct exercise with the correct stimulation, and then we can do that, and it's simple. We can do this at home. And they call them exercises, but it's really movements and maneuvers, if you will, that is going to deal with your eye tracking. It's going to deal with your muscle stability. It's going to deal with your balance and your coordination. And so perform twice a day for 10 minutes a day, we can stimulate that cerebellum to build the skills back in to the brain that maybe were never developed or for whatever reason are not there, and we can do that. So again, we stimulate the inner ear vestibular system, that's your balance, right? And we challenge the cerebellum. So it might be standing on one leg and leaning your head back and forth, whatever the case might be, but they're specifically designed for each person and what their specific needs are. And so there's rotational, lateral, anterior, posterior, vertical, vestibular stimulation, but that's essentially moving your head up and down, back and forth, rotating. And there's just an unending number of these combinations and challenges to the cerebellum. But that's what we're doing, and that's what creates that word I said earlier, plasticity. That develops the cerebellum. Plasticity is developing new function, new cells, new synapses, new connections in the brain, and that is what plasticity is, and we can do that in the cerebellum. When we do that, that improves the skills, or starts getting the skills automated, if you will, up here. If we can do that, then we improve the skills, then guess what? There's less need for conscious help from our control area, and it's automated and more skills are processed here. So they're being processed here. That opens up our thinking brain, if you will, to take in what it should be taking in, to make the decisions it should be making. The cortex is doing it, and remember, it's doing it possibly 100,000 times faster than what you could do it up here. So think about your productivity, whether it's in school, it's in work, or maybe athletic performance even going on with that. So we titled this, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. Well, real life changes are there when you develop the cerebellum. And so here's a kind of a post on this, and we didn't do anything to this child other than the fact that they developed the skills. And look how much better their eye tracking was. So their reading is going to improve because that skill. If that reading improves that skill, how much better are they going to be in the classroom, if you will? How much more is their intelligence going to be able to come out? How much better are they going to be socially, because now they're not labeled or they have low self-confidence because of what's going on. So you can understand how this changes lives and what happens with this. So here's one from a mom. She says, I knew he was very intelligent, but could never understand the reason for his struggle. And that's the misconceptions that are out there. We just don't know, because this is brand new, that we can develop these skills from the bottom up. And again, why does the problem occur in the cerebellum? All right. Well, that's where all the skills develop. As I said in the beginning, it's 100%, brainstem is 100% there when we're born. The rest of the brain is only 25% and has to develop. So this is where these skills come into. And guess what? This is where all that input comes in from all the proprioception, those postural muscles, all the signals from the muscles are coming right in here. And that's why the cerebellum is so important. Now, I've talked a lot about children kids, learning disabilities, those type of things. But guess what? Aging comes into play. And what happens as we age, we've said movement and that muscular input, those signals, is what develops this, all right? Well, guess what happens as we age? We're slower, and more conscious movements means less vestibular stimulation, less cerebellar activation or less coordination, more clumsiness. We need to think more about our automatic actions, or what used to be automated actions, and now we're having to think about it. So we have more load in the prefrontal cortex. We have less memory, recall. We get cognitive decline. We get less confidence in ourselves, right? We become less happy. And then guess what? Right back up here, even slower, more conscious, and it's this vicious cycle that we go into. So what if we could stop or slow down this decline? What if we could do these movements that don't slow us down as much, that keep our vestibular and cerebellar systems stimulated, and our brains actually still developing versus going the other direction? And it might improve our memory, our cognition. We could be more confident into our older years, and obviously more happy. And isn't that what we all want to be? So understand this, that this is for everybody. And I've even been on this program, and I'm going to share a little bit about that with you. Athletes, they want better consistency. They want faster response times. Guess what you need to do to get there? You have to go through the cerebellum. They want better control. They want better attention. They don't want impulsivity, right? You don't want those impulses happening. You have to be controlled when you're out there playing that sport. And they have to have emotional control, right? We've seen some very talented athletes that couldn't control their emotions, and therefore they've never reached their potential. And they also want less mental tiredness. And the less that they have to process in the cortex, then the better off they'll be in not having that mental tiredness. Because what's automated up here doesn't make you tired. What you have to do up here is what wears you out mentally. And so that's Zing Performance. That's the basis behind it. That's what we do. So how does it work? So Zing Performance is a personalized plan. You take an assessment. You can do that at the clinic, but you can do that at home on the computer. It takes about 35 minutes to do your initial assessment. And then you can do the eye tracking here in the office. We can't do that at home. We have to have the equipment. So you do that here in our clinic. The eye tracking is not essential for doing the program. If you're, distance away and can't do the eye tracking, we can still do this program. The eye tracking is just another benefit, another piece of the puzzle that we like to look at to see if there might be issues there. But then Zing creates a program for you. It's delivered online. You can get it on your phone, your computer, your tablet, and twice a day for 10 minutes a day, you go through these movements, exercises, and this is what stimulates the cerebellum and helps you start building in these skills. And everything's done at home. It's a very professional platform. They have coaching, encouragement. Everything they do is from the positive side of things, which I love, and they're getting to the cause. So the first thing you get is this assessment, and these are a little bit different for children than adults, but nonetheless, this kind of shows you 5 categories: visual working memory, auditory, concentration, memory recall, and reading for children. And it ranks you by percentile. So this is not a grade. This is just out of all the people they've tested, this is where you'd be at. Like this one, he's in the upper 79th percentile. So not terrible there. But look at memory recall. Really down here. Visual working memory is down. So anytime that this this child would be reading, looking at something on the board or on the image that the teacher has for them, anything that they're looking at, probably going to have problems with that. Auditory can be improved, but a lot better there. And look, this child has really good concentration. But here's where the potential is with the Zing program for that child to get to. And here's where they rank themselves. And look, as far as learning, they're ranking themselves as a 27, controlling their emotions, a 30, okay? Decent balance and coordination, decent organizational skills, still room for improvement, but imagine if we can get their learning and controlling their emotions up here. And so it's done. This is kind of an example of what it might look like. They give you instructions: sit on a chair with your feet shoulder width apart, raise both eyes, stretch as far right with both arms, stretch as far left. So some of them are doing seated, some of them are standing, whatever it might be. But it's a personalized program for each and every person. It's not one program does for everyone, because we all have different problems. We all have different skills that need developed. We're all at different levels. And so it's each person needs their own particular program to get the most benefit. So this is what they found. Those who follow the program for 6 months have 95% of those people improve in the 5 key areas, okay? And more than 50% of them improve in 8 key areas. So that's just one of the studies that they've done. But they've got a great track record on doing this. So what do they look at? They look at visual processing, how the brain makes sense of what your eyes see. Auditory, how the brain makes sense of what your ears hear. Balance and coordination, how do you navigate the space around you and the physical objects that are in your space. Communication and speaking, can you turn your thoughts and feelings into communication with others that the others can understand? And just your overall social skills, so understanding intention, emotions, body language, beliefs of others to adapt to different environments and situations. So all these things come into play. And so if you're looking at kids struggling with focus problems, attention, difficulties reading, adults, poor organization, low confidence, poor reading and writing skills, maybe communication skills, and athletes, just consistency in their performance, their concentration, the emotional control that goes along with that. So I'm going to give you mine here quickly as I finish up the presentation. So I have no better example than my own. But this is where I started. And so these are the 5 assessments. Reading is with children. That's response time with adults. And you can see that my percentile is 73, 63, 45, 81, and 18. And I have noticed as I've gotten a little bit more mature that my concentration is not what it used to be. And my response time, I was very shocked. I've always been pretty quick. And so I was kind of shocked by my response time. The orange boxes here on my initial assessment, that's the potential where they conservatively think they can help me with the Zing program. And this is where I ranked myself in the self-assessment categories. And again, where they think they can get me to. Well, I went on the program. This was 30 days. So at the 30-day mark, you'll redo the assessment. When you redo the assessment, the gray is where you started. The white is what you have improved. And look at this. My auditory working memory went up to 90 there. And so I always tell all my people in my presentations, don't tell my wife that I can hear and understand what she's saying better, okay? But look at that, up to a 90 there, went way past my potential. My concentration had come up to 55. Response time 18 to 27, so improvement. Not there yet, but improvement. But look, here's my self-assessments. I'm feeling like I am better in all these categories. So that was fantastic. And then here I was at 60 days. And look at 60 days. I'm 95, 90, 68, 98, and up to 61. I've went past what they thought my potential was in all of these categories. And look, in everything except my communication skills, which I'm a communicator, that's what I do. And they tell me I'm just too hard on myself in assessing that. But even that is improved. Maybe, not self-assessed where it should be, but I'm up and have reached potential in every area. So that's what this is really about, is seeing the improvements. Now, have I seen improvements on the analysis? Yes. Have I seen improvements in my own life? Yes. My memory recall, my attention, my ability to sleep better, my stress has been lowered, because guess what? There's not so much going on up here. That's where the stress is. I'm now getting some of those skills automated so I can be thinking about what I should be thinking about instead of the 6 things that are just in there that should have been automatically processed. So all these things, just names, words, and those things that would kind of, oh man, I got to think about that. Who was that? That has gotten much better with me. And so, and hey, my golf game's improving too. So if you can improve my golf game, you can impress me. So Zing Performance has obviously impressed me. So the neuroplasticity, we're stimulating new neuron synapses in the brain. We're getting it automated. We're allowing the thinking brain to do what it's supposed to do, and the rest of your brain to run those skills as they're supposed to. And this is just kind of an overview of the Zing Performance. The eye tracking, we're looking at eye coordination, concentration, horizontal, vertical tracking, and how your eyes are working together. And are your eyes working automatically as they should? And so this is what we do with eye tracking. It's in front of a computer. We bring you in to do that. And so, if there's reading difficulties, concentration, studying, spelling is a problem with poor eye tracking, and certainly sports come into play. But the eye tracking ranks you across the board. Again, concentration, control, accuracy, response time, coordination of the eyes, and the reading speed. And look, the coordination of my eyes was my lowest category. And hopefully this will work for you, but I'm going to show you my eye tracking. Yeah, kind of all over the place, right? And that really surprised me. But it helped me understand something that I have not understood for the last 50 years, and that's why people will sit down and just read mountains of books, and I'm be like, man, no, I'll listen to an audio book, but I want nothing to do with all that reading. And so it's something that I got an understanding of why I don't like reading, or I don't love reading. It's work for me. And so I'm hoping to see that the program will go back for me and help my reading skills, because I would love to read. And so I'll just go through this again, because again, this is both eyes together, and then I believe this will go into the separated eyes, and this is why my eyes, it shows that my eyes were not working together. And so that's my right eye, okay? And here it goes. You can see my right eye. There can be some improvement there, but I'm pretty much down the line with that. I can improve some, But next up, you're going to see my left eye. And look at this. And then this might explain to you why I don't love reading and it's hard work, because my left eye, while my right eye was staying right on there, was all over the place. So the coordination of my eyes. So that's where Zing Performance comes into play. And so we have this in our clinic, or we can help you implement this. We can get you tested. We can do that long distance. Again, we couldn't do the eye tracking, but please call our office. Our phone number is 423-402-4602. And just call our office. Tell our staff members that you're interested in the Zing Performance. They'll get you together with me or one of our techs, and we'll get you started on this program. And so I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope it explains some of the things maybe that have been misunderstandings about you or your kids or aging or whatever the case might be. But it's our goal, as it is with Winford's goal, to help as many people as we can with this. So if we can get that brainstem balanced, if we can get the atlas balanced, and then use the Zing Performance therapy or the exercises, if you will, to build those skills, it's going to be amazing what we can do. So I appreciate your attention. Have an absolutely blessed day.